Hello, everybody. Welcome to Health Hackers, episode 11. I'm Gemma Evans. I'm a journalist here in the UK, and this is my series devoted to interviewing the most pioneering figures in health and wellness. And my guest today is the great-great-grandson of famous naturalist Charles Darwin, all the way in Sydney. It's Chris Darwin. Hello, Chris.
Gemma, hi there. Hi, everybody.
We are going to be talking to Chris about meat, because today marks the start of World Meat-Free Week, which Chris is heavily involved with. But I also want to talk to Chris about his extraordinary life achievements, including holding the world's highest dinner party. Spoiler alert, some of the guests ended up with hypothermia. So stay with us for that, because I want to hear all about that. First though, Chris, let's talk about meat. Now, the first thing I was wondering is, what made you become a vegetarian? What made you quit meat to begin with?
Oh, well, as you can see, I've got Chip on my shoulder here for the audience who haven't been introduced to him. So I'm involved in nature conservation.
I should just say for the podcast listeners that Chris, if for anyone who's not watching the video, Chris is sitting with, is that a kangaroo on your shoulder?
Kangaroo with a little Joey in the pouch.
That's his chip on his shoulder. Sorry, Chris. But yeah, you were saying why you gave up meat.
And for the podcasters, it's not a real one. It's
yeah.
So,
we should make that clarification. I'm so sorry. It's not a real kangaroo. It's a fairy toy.
So I've for the last 25 years I've been involved in nature conservation, and we worked out pretty quickly that if we were going to really make some progress for nature conservation globally, we needed to stop the destruction of forests, the world's forests, and 74% around of the world's forests are cut down for meat. And so to start off with, Gemma, I started trying to convince people. Someone else will answer that, I hope. Let me just do that. Wait a second. There we are. To start off with, we tried to say, this is fantastic. Let's stop. Let's reduce our meat consumption for the benefit of the world's forests. And we got pretty much, Gemma, zero response. So then we did some market research, and we discovered, well, why do people give up meat? What makes people give up meat? And we very quickly discovered two things that make people give up meat, which is health, improved health, and animal welfare. So we basically, although I keep Chip on my shoulder here just to keep me remind me why I'm doing this. So we've had to really transfer across to really health. And of course, it's made a huge difference, because people, you say to somebody, stop cutting down a forest because of kangaroos and whatever it is, they sort of say, that sounds really important. But if you actually say, processed red meats cause cancer, you really get their attention then. You've actually got them engaged. And so we've transferred across.
You mentioned the cancer impact there, and that was something that really affected me when I first heard about that, and it impacted how much red meat I ate. But doing this Health Hackers series, I've spoken to so many different guests on the show, all with very differing opinions. And I know that the other day I was interviewing Professor Tim Noakes, and he says that he's practically carnivorous in his eating. And I said, oh, what about the cancer risk? And then, well, he said, historically, people who eat meat also smoke more and are less active, so you can't detect whether that was what caused the cancer. And he said that often if people give up meat, they could end up replacing it with carbohydrates, which isn't always a good thing in people. And then there opens up topics of insulin resistance, etc. I mean, what do you think of those sort of comments coming from professors?
Absolutely. I think that, I'd be interested to see what Tim said, because I think that I look on it, there's good meats and there's bad meats. And this is World Health Organization. So I should imagine WHO, I should imagine Tim would be supportive of this. I don't think anybody's saying having one organic free-range steak every week, which has got no hormones in it, is anything other than good for you. I really don't. I've never come across anybody who said, 75 grams of steak once a week, organic, free-range, hormone-free. I don't think. What we're talking about here is we're talking about the processed meats. So we're talking about the burgers, the salamis, the bacons. They're the ones that the World Health Organization and also just to get into, I don't want to sort of, start pitting different medical figures against different medical figures, because I didn't hear what Tim said. But the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, which is a group of physicians from America who have got together, and they put together their, which I'm very happy to send through to your potties, just talking about what processed red meats do to you. And they, for example, they are supposed to increase your chance of cancer by 21% of the intestine. So that's 21%. That's not red meat. That's the processed meats.
So we're talking about we're talking about sausages and bacon and ham.
Absolutely. And it seems to be, and I'm not a nutritionist, so I should say that, but it seems to be the processing of these meats seems to be the thing that requires a lot of chemicals to be added to them, and that's what seems to be causing the problem. So I think, I mean, I'm really the bandwagon I'm on, and I'm on this saying try to avoid three types of meats. Processed red meats, so that's the bacons, the burgers, the sausages. The second one to avoid is the dairy, large amounts of dairy. We're not really designed to eat baby cow's milk, particularly the guys. Again, if you have 2 glasses of milk a day, this is from the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, 2 glasses of milk a day. For the guys, your chance of prostate cancer increases by 20% if you do that. And that's a big jump. And the third thing to avoid, and I've actually had personal experience with my kids, because my little Monty used to eat a lot of tuna. And he used to have tuna in his sandwich, and you can probably see where this is going, Gemma. He got mercury. Yeah. We started to notice he was the youngest of the 3, and we started to notice that his memory wasn't as good as the others. And over the years, as he's growing up, you just wait, his memory, he can't remember names. And we had him tested, and he was really high on mercury.
Wow.
What do you learn from that? That's from the top predators of the sea. So that's tuna, marlin, and shark. And they get a thing called bioaccumulation, which is where the small fish eat a little bit of this, but it gets caught up in their fat levels. The bigger fish eat the next one, and you get every single trophic level, the levels of mercury increase. So, I mean, actually, most women know this. If you're pregnant, you don't eat tuna because of the mercury. So if you avoid those 3 things, you're pretty much set. And the idea is, if you avoid those things, you'll probably find you get 1 meat-free day a week, or maybe 2. And then you will not only will you be much healthier, you'll save some money. It's great for the environment. You're going to live a bit longer, because the study after study shows that if you have moderate amounts of meat, you live longer than if you are a big meat Western diet consumer. That's my understanding. But I'd be fascinated to hear what Tim says to that. Yeah.
Episode 10. Check it out on the podcast or the website, healthhackers.uk. But now you were talking about going meat-free for a day and making our meat consumption moderate, because you're not actually asking anybody to quit meat entirely, as you've explained. So this is what World Meat-Free Week is all about. Am I right?
Exactly. It's saying just try it for 1 meal or 1 day. I mean, we've got some great stats of what happens if you give up meat for a day. If you give up meat for 1 day a week for a year, what you get. So you're going to live 1 day longer. You're going to save yourself about 35 pounds. You're going to raise 2 people out of chronic malnutrition. And that is a very little known fact how that works. And I'm happy to come back to that, because that's really you're going to save 3 chickens, 54 fish, the same amount of greenhouse gases of driving from London to Birmingham. You're going to save the same amount of water as 300 baths, 1 tennis court of forest, and 3 tennis courts of marine reserve you're going to create. And that's if you just have 1 meat-free day per week for a year. It's not a big thing to ask, really, and you get all those benefits, And none of those are really in question, except for probably the one about the chronic malnutrition.
Yeah. Now, how is giving up meat for a day a week helping save children from chronic malnutrition?
Right. Yeah. So have you come across that? Because it's not a lot of people.
I've not come across that stat before. No.
I'm glad that we can open something new. So the question is, why are there any people on the planet hungry? Have you ever done any research into this? It's an extraordinary thing.
Sheer poverty. Lack of
Well,
resources to grow their own
yes.
food.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So two things. So poverty was the first one, and the second is availability. Actually, poverty is more than availability. So in fact, the reason there are 800 million, but we're getting a bit off health hacking, aren't we? We're into a
But this is
whole.
still fascinating, and my listeners, they love hearing all kinds of surrounding topics because it all impacts our health in the end.
Yeah, well, that's true. And maybe there's a bit of a broader issue of the health of humanity.
Yeah.
You know, do we feel good about ourselves knowing that there are 800 million people on the planet living in chronic malnutrition? And that's UN figures, 800 million. And here's another one. I know, have you got any kids?
No.
No. Well, for those who've got kids, get a load of this. Every year, 3.1 million children die of starvation, and that is 1 every 5 minutes. Now, I tell you what, you know, I'm sure I cared about kids before I had my own kids, but when you have your own kids, there's something really gets to you about that. I just go, every minute, another 5 children die of starvation. Now, there's more than enough food on the planet, so why are there 5 kids dying of starvation? Well, you pointed out, price is the first thing. So why is food so expensive? And that is a complicated one. It's about the breadth of wealth on the planet. We all know that some areas of the planet are very wealthy and some are not. But there's another one. Between about 1/3 and 1/4 of all grain on the planet is fed to what?
Animals.
Livestock, exactly. So what does that do to the price of grain on the planet?
Pushes it up.
Pushes
it down.
up.
Pushes it up.
Pushes it up because of, you know, supply and demand curves. The more demand there is for a product, and there is only a certain amount of agricultural land on the planet, so there is a sort of fixed supply, although it has been increasing a little bit. It doesn't actually increase that fast. So basically what we're doing, as we're feeding more, as the demand for meat goes up, and it's predicted to go up by about 75% by 2050. So 75% by 2050, because we're going to go up to probably, you know, 9 billion people by then. And not only that, people are eating more and more meat. So as that goes up, we're going to get more and more. There's only a certain amount of land on the planet. So that's going to push more livestock into factory farms to produce that demand. Therefore, more grain is going to have to be fed to them. And what's that going to do? Well, what has that been doing? Because we don't even need to look forward. What that's effectively been doing is pushing the world price of meat up. Therefore, while the world price of grain up.
Right.
So while people have been getting wealthier, the price of food has been increasing about about the same price. So you go back to 1991, there were about 800 million people on the planet with chronic malnutrition. The UN thought we were going to get it down by about 2000s down to about 500 million, but it hasn't happened. And the reason is because the price of food keeps going up. So for me, I mean, why do you get out of bed in the morning, and why do I work and I don't get paid for what I'm doing right now? Why do I do it? And one of the things is those 5 children every minute who are dying of starvation. I go, that is just appalling, and future generations will just be appalled. And isn't it a wonderful thing that you actually can't feed them, but by having 1 meat-free day a week, you are actually you're making a difference.
Because we're creating less of a demand for meat, which impacts the grain, which impacts the costs and the whole economy of that.
Exactly.
I see. So what do you think is the worst thing that could happen? So if we all kept eating meat and nobody had a meat-free day per week, what do you think is the worst that can happen? What's the disaster scenario?
Look, I mean, I'm really excited that you've got a program called HealthHackers, because I just think I think that the health in the Western world is just one of these really bizarre things. We live in peace, and we've lived in peace most of my life. I'm 57. I mean, I've never had to fight in a war. We've got all this beautiful food that is available to us. We have enormous facilities and resources, and yet so many of us are so unhealthy. And I really enjoyed listening to your 2 podcasts. I listened to the one on sugar. That was really fantastic. And then Roger Frampton talking about movement. That was 2 good things. I mean, I think I knew a little bit about sugar, but I didn't know about movement as much. And he gave me some really lovely ideas. We've got the full knowledge to be really healthy. but we choose not to be. And I think that is what really worries me, is that it just seems sad that we can't be just healthier.
Yeah, and in fact, I've got an upcoming podcast about motivation and why it is that we all know the right thing to do. And actually, that is debatable, because sometimes I think I know the right thing to do, and then I speak to differing health experts who have differing views, and then I wonder what I even knew to begin with. But just going back to that kind of disaster scenario, what would be the worst outcome if we didn't stop or moderate our meat eating? I mean, what's the world going to look like? How damaging is it to the planet?
So you're looking at the environmental stuff, are you?
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily need to be on a personal impact, but if we all, because there's a reason you're doing this, as you explained, it's important to have one meat-free day a week, if possible, just to play that part little and often, and it all equates to a bigger message and a bigger picture. But I wonder, what's the alternative? Like, what are we moving away from?
What are we moving away? What are we avoiding if we do this?
Exactly. What's the worst that could happen, do you think?
Well, I mean, we live on a small, moist lump of rock spinning through the desert of space. We got nowhere else to go. So when you look at the environmental message, I mean, I think the trouble is, I feel your audience might be stifling a yawn, because they've probably heard it all before. And so, but ultimately, we're looking at, we're damaging the life support systems of the planet. I mean, for me, it's just irrational. I mean, I've been working in nature conservation all these years, and I'm, heavily motivated because we're basically causing a mass extinction of species on the planet. That's what we're doing. And because we're on the land, we're cutting down the forests for agriculture, and in the oceans, we're overfishing. Those are the two factors. They're both producing our meat. And so why do we need chip or some lizard somewhere? And the reason is complicated, but it's actually very simple, that we live in this beautifully orchestrated system on this planet run by a thing, Mother Nature in inverted commas, but it's actually, all these animals are actually contributing to make our planet what it is. And we are designed for that. And so if we destroy it, which is what we're doing, we are undertaking an unsupervised experiment on a planetary scale, the outcome of which is completely unknown, but is unlikely to be impressive. And our future generations will just rub their heads wondering what we were thinking, because we know what we're doing. The question is, Gemma, do we have the courage to face the realities of our day, to feel them deeply enough so they transform us and our future?
We might not have a choice at some point. I wonder though, if we all stopped eating meat, just imagine, and wouldn't we have this imbalance? And if we had too many animals, then wouldn't that lead to problems? I don't know, I'm thinking of rural communities, farming communities, there'll be unemployment, and maybe we'd end up having to chop down forests because we need to make room to grow more crops, because we'd all be eating plant-based foods. I mean, do you think there are, arguments on the other side about why we should continue eating meat?
Well, okay, let's just look at it. Let's just say, I mean, I've got some great stats of what happens if every English person had one meat-free day per week for a year. So let me give you those, and that'll give you your answer, really. Okay. So the population would live 300,000 years longer. We would save £2.3 billion worth. There would be, we would save, 500,000 cows, 200 million chickens, 3 billion fish and prawns. We'd save an area of forest the size of every national park in England and Wales. We'd save the equivalent greenhouse gases of driving to the sun and back 64 times. And so it goes on. I mean, I suppose I don't think I'm quite answering your question. Your question is, what would be the impact from farmers, really, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and can there be such a thing as, would there be too many animals? Would that be disruptive to the food chain for us?
So what would happen? I mean, if we basically, producing a vegetarian diet uses producing a vegan diet produces about a fifth of the land of producing a big meat diet. Therefore, you basically what you would find is we know we're going to get an extra 2 billion of people on the planet in the next 35 years. 2050 there should be 9 billion about, and maybe a little bit more. So we're going to have to produce a lot more food. Now we know that due to trophic levels, feeding people at a lower trophic level is always more efficient than feeding people up the food chain. Therefore, if you eat a vegetable, it's more efficient than eating a cow, because the cow's got to eat the grass to digest it, and obviously it's running around. It doesn't transfer the energy from the grass 100% efficiently into its own meat, or nowhere near it. Therefore, you need a lot less land. Therefore, what you'll be effectively doing is you'll be converting some livestock land into growing crops, which will then help feed the extra 2 billion people who are about to join us on this planet in our lifetimes. I mean, even in my lifetime, it's going to do it. So and at the same time, you'll be able to reforest quite large areas of the planet, because you won't need as much land to feed everybody. So, okay. I mean,
no, sorry, did I cut you off there?
No, it's all right. No, there's a lot of upside. Now, will there be some farmers put out of business? Probably. I actually think it's unlikely it's going to happen, because I think
you'd say anyway that it sounds to me like the benefits outweigh any negatives. So let's move on, because I know we're short on time, and I really want to talk to you about your fascinating life, because people must talk to you a lot about your great granddad, but you've done some fascinating things. So let me get this right. You've completed successfully 2 world first expeditions. The first Round Britain Windsurf expedition. Am I right here?
Yeah, I was a photographer on that. I wasn't the windsurfer. I went
around the country, didn't you? And you held the world's highest dinner party.
Well, they are, Gemma. You'd have been a good candidate for that, I think. I think you'd have enjoyed that. That was great fun. The wine did freeze, which was a disaster.
The wine froze. So hang on, where did you hold the world's highest dinner party?
Yeah, Mount Huascarán in Peru.
Peru, okay. And who were your guests?
Yeah. So we had a great group of people, and we climbed. Actually, it was amazing. We went there. This was a long time ago. This was 89, I think it was. And at the time, Peru, there were not many people climbing in Peru. So we climbed up this mountain, and we didn't see anybody on the whole way up the mountain. We didn't, and we set up our dining room table on the summit, and got out our ball dresses and top hat and tails. We didn't know that 2 brothers were climbing up the other side of the mountain, and they hadn't seen anybody else on their 7-day ascent. And I'll never forget the expression on their face when their heads popped up and they saw us on the summit with our dining room table and chairs. They just couldn't believe the whole thing. So it was an amazing experience. And who were the guests? Oh, look, it was like you and me meeting in a pub and saying, let's do this. And then we get a few of our friends together and off we go. And it was very,
what was on the menu? Do you remember?
Well, I do remember, yeah, because this was a long time ago. We actually brought a smoked trout from Australia. But by the time we actually got it to the top of the mountain, it was 6 weeks old. So no one quite had the courage to eat it. So it was quite a funny thing. So, yes, but we had to eat, for the Guinness Book of Records, we had to eat something. So I think we had some potatoes and, I forgot.
And how many of your guests got hypothermia during dessert?
Yeah, I got hypothermia, and Neil did. And it's amazing when you get hypothermia. You sort of slip off. I saw a photograph of you in the snow, so you're obviously, you understand the cold. If you ever get hypothermia, it's extraordinary experience. You become a little bit euphoric, and nothing seems to be a problem. And I was just sat in the snow, and I couldn't walk. So to get on the mountain, I had to sit down and pull myself down the mountain and there were people shaking me, saying, "Chris, you've got hypothermia. You've got to get going. You're going to die if you don't do something." And you go, "No worry, it's all fine. I'm going to be fine." You just get into this sort of rather, euphoric state. Yeah. It's extraordinary.
I'm a presenter over here, and I filmed one episode of my show on top of a volcano in Iceland, and we had to wear like these kind of NASA spacesuits over the top of our ski jackets and thermals and every layer you could imagine. I don't think I could have worn any more layers, but while I was up there, I remember I just lost all feeling in my fingers. I've got bad circulation as it is, but up there and then you can't operate, you can't do what you need to be doing because I just couldn't move my fingers. And I remember this mountain guide like he looked a little bit concerned and was taking my hands trying to warm them up. But similarly to you, I was just like, oh, sure, it'll be fine, yeah. And then occasionally I'd think, oh my god, what if I need to go to hospital? Oh no, I'll be fine. But I mean, I wasn't having a dinner party and I wasn't breaking any Guinness World Records, so congratulations for doing that. What made you want to do it though? Because it just seems very random.
Yeah, it was pretty random, wasn't it? Oh, look, I mean, what made me do it? I don't know. You know, it was literally like you and I meet in a pub and we're going, let's do something ridiculous. It was a visual joke. I worked in advertising and so I seem to just have a mind that just thinks something.
And why not? And one thing we need to talk about that we haven't yet, you have an app to help people realize their effect of not eating meat a day a week. Now, what's the app called and where can people get it and what will they learn from the app?
Oh, thank you, Gemma. So the app's called the Darwin Challenge. It's available on the App Store and it basically outlines the benefits. It's a motivational tracking app. So you tap, you had a meat-free day. So let's just say you have a meat-free day. And what it does is it shows you the benefits on 10 metrics. How much longer you're going to live. You should live about 45 minutes longer per meat-free day. You will save a little bit of money, about nearly a pound. You're going to save a little bit of a chicken. You're going to save a little bit of a cow. You're going to save a little bit of a fish. Well, actually, a fish or a prawn per day. And then it shows you the greenhouse gases and all the other ones. So it's just a little. I mean, we did our research and we realized that people, when they're reducing their meat consumption, they need lots of motivation. And so the motivation seemed to be a really lovely thing to do, is to show them how they're not only making their own lives better, but actually their world better as well. So the app's called the Darwin Challenge.
The Darwin Challenge, okay. And where can people follow your work and hear more about you? Because you've raised over $1.3 million for charity because you're the ambassador of Bush Heritage Australia, is that correct?
You've done really good research.
Oh, I love researching my guests. They're always fascinating.
Look, I mean, so we got a website called thedarwinchallenge.org. So that we got some social media on there, and that's where we do use the app. I'm also, as you mentioned, an ambassador of a charity called Bush Heritage, and we have a million hectares of Australia, and hence the kangaroo. So I've doing lots of interesting things. So, but I appreciate your research. And may I say, actually, I've got an idea for a podcast for you.
Oh, yeah.
Why don't you do a podcast on yourself?
On me?
I'll be introduced to you. Happy to interview you, because I think you've actually got. I mean, you've got a whole story yourself. I've done some research on you too.
Ooh.
Your nut allergy.
Oh yeah, you nearly died from my nut allergy. Yeah, gosh.
You had a full anaphylactic shock, have you?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's always been a scary issue for me my whole life, because I've had this lifelong nut allergy, and it is potentially fatal. And sometimes you go to places and they say, no, there are no nuts in this, and then there were, and then you nearly die, which is quite scary. But this isn't about me. But I have got. Oh, sorry, what were you going to say?
Well, I was saying that actually I think it could be about you, because you could actually condense all this knowledge you're getting in, and it could be really interesting. But anyway, that was just an idea. So often the people behind the cameras are actually often more interested than the ones in front of the cameras. But you're in front. And
I don't know about that, but I could always do an episode and just ramble about me. But I quite like the interaction. It's always so enjoyable to speak to other people and hear about, everything we've been talking about today is so interesting. And I have one last question, which has nothing to do with HealthHackers or the environment, but I wanted, what was it that made you move to Australia? Because you are British.
Yeah,
I wonder
sure.
why you moved there.
Oh, look, I think I used to go to see the latest James Bond film at Leicester Square in London, and you'd see beautiful beaches and when and you go, where is that? Where are those places? And so I went to Australia. I went to work originally to work in Australia, and then just liked it. And but London's lovely as well. So I actually really miss London. We miss all the characters in London. London's full of great characters. So are you based in London?
I am. I'm just outside of London, but I've actually lived in and around London my entire life. So I know what you mean about those characters.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great city. I come back regularly, and I don't fly, so I come on a container ship, Gemma. I given up flying.
Because you're doing that for environmental reasons?
Yeah.
Do you think someone can call themselves an environmentalist if they still eat meat?
Look, I think the definition of environmentalist is to work out your ecological footprint, which is the sum total of your entire impact on the planet. And if you are above one planet, you're not an environmentalist. And if you are below one planet, you are. And so when I started measuring it, which I did about 7 years ago, I was 5.7 planets, because I just used to jump on an airplane all the time, just didn't think about it. And I've slowly gone from 5.7 down, and for the last 3 years, I've been below one planet. And it's, apart from flying, which I have given up, I haven't given up anything else apart from flying. And I do occasionally have meat. I do still occasionally have meat. Yeah.
That's really interesting. So you're not actually a vegetarian?
No, I'm not actually a vegetarian.
You're a flexitarian?
Yeah, I'm a flexitarian. I haven't eaten meat. My last meat was the 30th of April this year. And the most of the meat I eat is meat which our kids, we try not to impose, our eccentricities on our kids. So we try and keep them, because as you probably worked out, I'm a pretty different sort of cat. And I don't want my kids to be as sort of eccentric to me, really. So we give them meat, and when they throw away meat, I sometimes eat it, because I hate seeing food going to waste. And there's a whole podcast for you, food waste.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah.
Maybe that's not healthy. Yeah.
Chris, you've been a fantastic guest. Thank you so much for coming on Health Hackers. I wish we could have quadrupled the time we spend on this podcast, because there's so much more to talk to you about. Good luck with World Meat Free Week and the app and all your charity work, because I have so much admiration and respect for what you're doing. It's wonderful and really great to talk to you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
And everybody else. Cheers.
And I should say, podcast listeners, if you enjoyed listening to this episode, please subscribe to Health Hackers, and then you can get notified every time I get a new guest and a new episode. And leave me a nice review if you've got nice things to say. That would be wonderful, because it means so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.